Assalamu alaikum brothers and sisters, welcome back to the Sapience Thoughts video series where we're discussing nihilism, consumerism and the Islamic antidote to both. Now in this episode we're going to look at the direct link between the ideas promoted by the Enlightenment philosophers and nihilism. So why is it, the question we're going to be addressing is, why does godlessness lead to nihilism? Why is it the case that when you deny God, whatever worldview you may come up with or follow, but one which denies a creator, why does that entail that you would inevitably end up in or with nihilism? Now the reason is very simple. When you deny God, essentially what you're saying is that there is no creator, there is no cause behind the universe, behind existence. And ultimately what you're essentially saying, therefore, is that everything that exists, the universe and everything within the universe, is a result of an accident. It's one big accident, essentially. The universe and everything that exists is one big accident. Because there is no God, there is no cause, there is no creator behind all of this. Now, if this is the case, if everything is one big accident, that means you and me, us included, are also just accidents. Everything is an accident. And accidents, especially from a godless perspective, accidents don't have a purpose, an objective. Accidents just happen. It's like when you spill milk, well, it's just spilled milk. Obviously, from an Islamic perspective, we believe everything has a reason behind it. However, from a godless perspective, it's just an accident. It means nothing. Now, if you mean nothing, and everything around you means nothing, that means everything about your existence, your life, means nothing. There is no meaning behind anything. So, ultimately, you have ended up with nihilism. This is nihilism. Everything is meaningless. Life is meaningless. Your existence is meaningless. There is no purpose. There is no rhyme or reason behind your existence. Now, understanding this, guys, let's look at this idea that was proposed by the Enlightenment philosophers and thinkers, that of progress, worldly progress. Our objective is to create a worldly paradise. Now, this is a very interesting proposition because on one end, this leads to nihilism because you're turning away from God, and we've seen how that can lead to nihilism. But on the other end, it also acts as a patch, a temporary fix for that nihilism. Because although you've proposed an idea which takes people away from God, but the idea itself is giving human beings a purpose, a goal, which is to create a worldly paradise. So it's a very interesting proposition. And therefore, it sort of patched that problem that people would inevitably fall into. And as the centuries and decades went by and people became more and more godless, more and more atheistic in their thinking, in what they followed, the more they experienced nihilism. So the problem of nihilism didn't go away, although it was patched by the Enlightenment thinkers. It was still there, but the more people moved away from God, and as we mentioned, the Enlightenment thinkers weren't necessarily atheists. They believed in natural theology. They believed in a cause, a creator out there, that created everything and ordered everything. However, didn't follow, weren't the traditional theists, if you like. But as the decades went by, people became more and more atheistic, and as they became more and more atheistic, the more they fell more and more into nihilism. So, understanding this, we need to now move on and really sort of analyze nihilism. We need to really understand what is nihilism. Now let's go by, a dictionary definition to start off with. If you look at Oxford, they state that the belief that life has no meaning or purpose and that religious and moral principles have no value. This is a sort of general definition. If we were to really sort of summarize this and condense this down, we can say nihilism means the absence of meaning. There is no meaning behind anything. Now, Donald A. Crosby, in his book Spectra of the Absurd, which is a phenomenal book on the topic of nihilism, he breaks down nihilism into 5 distinct categories. They are moral nihilism, epistemological nihilism, cosmic nihilism, existential nihilism, and political nihilism. I want to focus on the first 4. Political nihilism isn't really relevant to our discussion here, but if we look at the first 4, moral nihilism, and just to give you a bit of context to this, moral nihilism is referring to the point that there is no objectivity behind morals. There is no truth behind morals. Epistemological nihilism is that there is there are no quote-unquote absolute truths or facts. There is no such thing. So it's linked to moral nihilism as well to a degree. And you'll notice all of these categories do link to one another in some way, but they have their distinct understanding too. So epistemological nihilism is that there is no what you call truth, or there are no facts. It's all sort of subjective and up to the individual as to determine as to what they believe is true, or what they believe is a fact. Then you have cosmic nihilism, which is the understanding that there is no intelligibility behind our cosmos, our universe. You know, that it's that the universe and nature is indifferent to us humans. There is no rhyme or reason, no order behind our universe itself. And existential nihilism is more specifically focused on the idea that life itself is meaningless, that there is no meaning or purpose behind our existence. Now, these are the sort of different categories of nihilism. But what's very interesting is if you really think about them, you realize that not only are they linked to one another, but they all ultimately lead to a type of existential nihilism. That essentially, life itself is meaningless. And life, and our conscious life, that we can think about the world, the cosmos, morals, ethics, we are ethical beings, you know, everything is meaningless. So it all boils down to this meaninglessness. Everything is completely and utterly meaningless. Now, why is this a problem? One may ask. Well, you know, fine, there is no meaning behind our existence. There's no meaning behind anything. Morals, ethics, the cosmos, whatever. There's no meaning behind all of these things. Why is this a problem? Someone may ask this question. Well, essentially, as human beings, we are meaning-driven creatures. We seek meaning behind everything. We see everything through the lens of meaning. Think about it for a second. When you wake up in the morning and you get out of bed, say at 9 a.m., Monday to Friday, it's for a reason. There is a purpose behind it. There's meaning behind you getting out of bed at 9 a.m. When you get to bed at 10 p.m. at night, there's a meaning behind that. There's a reason behind that. There is a purpose behind that. And everything you do in between, from waking up to going to sleep, you do for a reason, a purpose, a meaning. Our lives are ordered via meaning. Not only this, when we look at the world around us, when we try to understand the world around us, we ascribe meaning to the world. We ascribe meaning to the things around us. We want to get to the bottom of, you know, things, understanding things, the meaning behind things. That's what scientists do all the time. Seeking the meaning behind things, the purpose of things. Not only this, when we make things as human beings, when we produce things as human beings, which is natural to human beings, we do this, we've been doing this forever. We make things and design things with purpose, for a reason, things that have a meaning. So we are meaning-driven creatures. We can't escape this. And therefore it's natural that we would apply the same thinking to ourselves. Well, what is the meaning of my existence? What is the meaning of my life? What is the ultimate purpose to my life? This is a fundamental question. And not only is this an extremely important question for human beings, one we can't run away from or escape, but it's a question that, if unanswered adequately, leads to a lot of despair, a lot of anxiety, a lot of pain, existential angst, as it was referred to by the existentialist philosophers. It's not something you're like, oh, life is meaningless. That's it. I'm going to sit there and do nothing. I'm okay with that. I'm happy about that. No, it causes a lot of pain. It causes a lot of distress. And if you're someone that's experienced this, you'll know I'm someone that's personally experienced this. And it leads you to a very dark place, you know, and to a place that when you're there, you can't think about anything else. You can't focus on anything else. You can't worry about anything else. Everything else in life that we assume to be what life is all about normally becomes trivial, pointless. Work, eating, you know, taking care of yourself, family, all of these things become trivial when you're really in that dark spot, when you don't know who you are, when you really engage that question. So it's a fundamental question. It is a big problem. Nihilism is a huge, huge, huge problem. Now, how is modernity tried to deal with nihilism? This is another thing we need to look at. Now, there's a couple of things that I'm going to mention here, but this is not an exhaustive list by any stretch. However, these are some of the key ways that modernity has tried to deal with nihilism, which is a rampant problem. I would even call it the Achilles heel of modernity. Nihilism is the Achilles heel of modernity. Now, in the 19th century, you had the existentialist philosophers. Now, these were a group of philosophers that focused on addressing these fundamental questions that humans have in regards to our existence, our purpose, why are we here, how are we to live, How are we to engage with the world around us? How are we to understand the world around us? Now, these philosophers included people like Nietzsche, Jean-Paul Sartre, Albert Camus, Kierkegaard, and the list goes on. And these philosophers tried to address this problem. And you have to now also remember the context here. The world has experienced World War I, World War II. Therefore, human beings have experienced atrocities, bloodshed, corruption, a lot of evil. People have experienced what they refer to as the irrational aspects of nature, of human beings. And this has further pushed people now to a state of despair and nihilism. And this is why the existentialist philosophers became really popular at this time in history. And they try to address this problem of meaninglessness. How do we deal with it? Unlike the new atheists today, they were actually people who really thought about these questions and understood, well, in the absence of God, there is no ultimate meaning to life. This is something you'll find common amongst all of these existentialist thinkers and philosophers. Most of them acknowledged that there is no ultimate meaning to life. They began with that point, and then they thought, okay, now how do we remedy this? This is what they essentially tried to do. Now, for example, Jean-Paul Sartre, much of his writing is about taking responsibility, living a responsible life, and so on and so forth, although life is ultimately meaningless. So he tried to patch that problem. Nietzsche tried to do something very similar. Nietzsche's idea, he proposed this idea of the Übermensch or the Superman, and we're going to discuss this in a bit more detail in a minute, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about that right now, but this was what he proposed. And again, it was about creating your own value, creating your own meaning system as a human being, realizing that ultimately there is no meaning to life. Camus, on the other hand, talked about the absurd, what he referred to as the absurd, which was that on one end, we have to acknowledge that without God, life is at bottom ultimately meaningless. And once we acknowledge this, well, yet there's another problem, which is that man can't help but seek meaning. So now you're in this place of absurdity, which is on one end, you understand that there is no ultimate meaning to life, but on the other end, you can't help but seek meaning. And you're between this struggle throughout your life. And you have to navigate this space essentially. So this is how they would sort of try to tackle this issue of nihilism. But ultimately what they were doing is they were just making things up. In a crude way, if I was to summarize this, they were literally making up things to plug this hole, which they acknowledged, which was life is ultimately meaningless. So they had no answers to this question. All they were saying is, what you can do is you can make up an objective for yourself, something that's more virtuous and something that has some ethical drive to it, that you are to have a higher value system, you're to be a responsible human being, take care of others, but make up your own meaning. And they tried to also suggest that this was in some way, somehow, a meaningful thing to do. Now, on one level, you can understand what they did and you can respect this and you can really sort of commend them for this. But on another level, you have to realize and acknowledge that this is not really addressing the problem, because all one has to do is sit down and think to themselves, you know what, as good as this sounds, this is nothing short of lying to myself. I'm just making this up. This ultimately means nothing. Ultimately, it means nothing. Because ultimately my life at bottom has no meaning or purpose. So that was one way they tried to address, modernity has tried to address nihilism. More recently, we've had other philosophies, worldviews, ways of looking at life, you can say, such as hedonism, which is the idea, just go do whatever you want, the YOLO mentality. Enjoy yourself, have fun, go out there, express yourself, fulfill your desires, just enjoy yourself. And that is the meaning of life. And people have engaged in this, and people are engaging in this to many different levels today. However, this is not solving the problem, because we see time and again people that have a lot of wealth, have a lot of disposable income, money. They go and they buy loads of expensive things, go enjoy themselves, fulfill their desires to the max. However, they still are not satisfied and truly happy on a deep level. There's still something missing. How many times do we hear of actors committing suicide? Or really rich and affluent people suffering from depression and anxiety. Time and again, we see these stories over and over again. Another way is consumerism. And we're going to go into a lot more detail here with consumerism later on in this video series. But consumerism is another way which human beings have tried to deal with the problem of nihilism. Well, life is meaningless. maybe I'm going to find meaning through material possessions. I go buy more things, it gives meaning to my life. And this is something that's been pushed and promoted by the people that are running these systems, if you like, because this, it's like killing two birds with one stone. On one end is something that's going to lead to exponential economic growth. It's going to lead to us attaining paradise on earth. And at the same time, it may just, if it helps fill a void of a human being, of emptiness and meaninglessness, then so be it, The other way is different types of escapism. Drugs is a very common thing, alcohol abuse, and more recently with the youth, gaming. People are choosing to lose themselves in this digital sphere, spending hours a day playing games. And it's very interesting the games are designed. There are levels in a game, right? You have a purpose, an objective in a game. Your character has an objective. You have to overcome and conquer each level and move on to the next level. And you have this sense of responsibility and meaning that's given to you in this digital space. But it's unfortunate that people are choosing to lose themselves in these games because that's not reality. And people, especially the young people, are completely cutting off from the real world and taking responsibility for their lives and things going on around them. So these are the failed ways that modernity has tried to deal with or tackle the problem of nihilism. But at bottom, you cannot run away from or escape nihilism if you continue to deny God. That is the key point here. You can try finding patches. You could try to come up with some fancy, deep sounding philosophies and ideas, but fundamentally, you're still not going to be able to escape this problem. So in the next video, brothers and sisters, we're going to be addressing or looking into nihilism a little bit more deeper, in particular Nietzsche's specific views in regards to nihilism and how he tried to tackle it and what his contentions were against religion and the religious answer to nihilism. So yeah, I'll leave you guys with this. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below, and I'll see you guys next time. Assalamu alaikum.